Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Tuesday, November 28th, 2023, and today we are going to be talking about President Joe Biden and his pathway to re-election, as numerous polls have come in that show Joe Biden at a very bad point compared to President Trump, losing to him on the national average by 2.6%, the best polls Republicans have seen since the 2012 presidential election. President Donald Trump presently is slated to do very well against President Biden in a potential rematch in the 2024 presidential election. Now, it wasn't always like this on the side of Joe Biden and Donald Trump. The polling had always indicated a very close race between the two. But for a brief period of time, in fact, actually an extensive period of time, President Biden had maintained a lead over President Trump throughout the early parts of this year. And although Donald Trump did maintain a lead, he never really expanded more than 2.5%. Whereas today, he has expanded beyond that, and it looks like that lead is going to continue to grow. And as the media narrative sort of paints a picture that Joe Biden is on track to lose the upcoming presidential election, I want to sort of ground ourselves and look at where Joe Biden has a pathway of victory in 2024 and what that would look like in the current state of polling and the current state of the American electorate. On your screen right now is the 2024 presidential electoral map, where we will look at and see where Republicans are going to do quite well and where Democrats will as well. With Joe Biden at the top of the ticket, there are areas that he does better in than most Democrats and areas where he might lack in compared to his most recent performance in the 2020 presidential election. Now, political betting markets haven't really changed over the past 3 months, despite the polls fluctuating up and down away from the Democratic Party. The betting markets pretty much have been solid in saying that Joe Biden is still going to win re-election, but the question is, how secure are they in on that, and how secure will they be on that going into the next election? Now, looking at the polls from FiveThirtyEight as well, they also show a very competitive race, but largely with the Republicans ahead. If it isn't Donald Trump leading Joe Biden, it's Nikki Haley or Ron DeSantis. So it looks like there are some pretty strong avenues for the Republicans moving forward. But the question is, again, how much of this is going to be maintained into the next year? And does Joe Biden have a pathway forward? And I honestly think the answer is yes. I do believe that Joe Biden is at a much weaker position today than he was 6 months ago. The polling indicates that, the fundraising indicates that, and the general sentiment around him handling a variety of foreign policy issues and domestic issues have become bigger concerns for voters, especially his base this time around, than they were in 2020 or for any year prior for Democrats in a presidential election. Looking at where Joe Biden is currently, he isn't doing well either in polling or approval, which makes it a very difficult sell that Joe Biden does have a pathway forward. But if anything has been proven over the past 3 years, it's that the polls don't always indicate the correct election response. Take a look at 2022, where Democrats were expected to lose a large amount of seats in the House. You're talking 30, 40, 50 seats in the House. They were going to lose the Senate by preposterous margins, lose Georgia, lose Nevada, lose Arizona, lose Pennsylvania all in one sweep, maybe even New Hampshire at that point. They won all of them, right? And you take a look at a lot of the competitive races in the governor's races, Democrats expanded. House races, Democrats held on strong, just lost 10 seats despite the expected forecast of them losing around 30, 40 to 50. You also see that was coupled with Joe Biden's approval rating being in the gutter, right? Most recently, we had a governor election in Kentucky. Democrats won there. It's a Trump plus 30 state. Andy Beshear won by 5, right? You take a look at issue 1 in the state of Ohio, the issue of abortion. President Joe Biden, obviously the Democrats, backing a pro-choice stance on this, a 13-point margin in a state that Donald Trump won by 8 points. So it is very clear that despite all this narrative, election results still prove Democrats won the Virginia legislature, right? They did very, very well in Mississippi, came within 3 points of victory in Mississippi, a very, very solid Republican state as well, without an incumbent. Kentucky, they had an incumbent. In Mississippi, it was a Republican incumbent who won by just 3 points. I mean, the amount that these margins have been narrowed down to, the way Democrats have been able to outperform, defies all the polling and all the metrics that seem to have indicated that they were doomed for defeat from the beginning. So how does this tie into President Joe Biden? Well, I think it very much does. In a very, very honest way, I do believe the Democratic Party is on track to do well in 2024 outside of the presidential election. The Senate races, they have some very strong recruits. They have some very weak GOP candidates. The House races, especially with redistricting done in New York, and expected to be solidified as it just was in New Mexico, and counteracting the gerrymander that's about to take place in North Carolina. A gerrymander in New York will be expected to counteract that. Democrats are expected to do equally as well as they did in 2022, which isn't a bad place to be because it gives them a 10-seat striking distance, a 5-seat really striking distance for that majority the next time around, or they could reasonably win back the majority, and that is a very, very high possibility given that now Alabama has to draw a new district for Democrats. Louisiana is expected to do. South Carolina is expected to do. Florida might have to with the Voting Rights Act. I mean, so many different parts of the country might be in turn violating the Voting Rights Act. And as a result, Democrats will have to do well. So again, going back to this point of Joe Biden, we've talked about him. We're 5 minutes in and haven't really spoken much about how he has a pathway forward. Before we do that, I know I've been putting it off quite a bit. I want us to take a look at the red states. The Democrats just simply are not going to win. Right? You're talking about the red seats, the red states. The Democrats do not have a realistic shot at winning. That means I include states like Florida, I include states like Ohio, I include states like Iowa, where Democrats simply are not going to win there in 2024, especially presently with where the numbers are now. Even with that, I would include states like Texas. Even though Democrats do have it on their radar, I do want to also acknowledge that, at the end of the day, this state is a red state. Democrats haven't been able to win here since Jimmy Carter, and I do not believe an election with Joe Biden is going to be the first time it does. It will be in the future. I think, Texas is undeniably getting a lot closer than it has in years past, but I do not believe in 2024 that Texas will be a blue state as of right now. That can change, though, because we are a year out from the election, but not much typically does, especially on the presidential level. A lot of these states, roughly 80 to 90% of them, we can predict this far out in advance. But with these remaining states, I mean, what I'm going here to show you is to give you this pathway forward for the Biden campaign where they could have a realistic shot at victory today, given the circumstances that will arise in 2024, that the circumstances that will be conducive to their victories in some of these states. And I think seeing issue 1 in the state of Ohio was a very, very eye-opening experience in showing that red states don't always agree with Republicans on everything, especially on the issue of abortion. Now, in 2022, what happened in Kansas was that it was a red state. Trump won it by 15. They backed a constitutional right to abortion, and they did so because they are a pro-choice state. But that happened in a year, just months before, a general election in which the Democrats did very, very well. It was sort of like a warning sign to Republicans. It was immediately after the Dobbs decision. You're talking 4 months after the Dobbs leak, 3 months after the actual decision was struck down in August of 2022. Democrats held on strong in that state. And with that, you saw Democrats ushering in turnout in primary elections. They coincided it with the primaries. Democrats did quite well. Democratic primary turnout was very, very high. Registration was very, very high. You look at Ohio too. You start to see, okay, wait a second. Seeing who turns out for these referendums, Democrats clearly are winning on it because they are winning the turnout game and the majority of the public is on their side. You look at the issue of abortion becoming a very prevalent one in Kentucky. You see here that, Democrats win by 5. You see that abortion was a very big issue in Virginia's legislature. Democrats were able to win back control of the House of Delegates and maintain control of the Virginia State Senate for 4 more years. So when you keep that in mind, you think, okay, for 2024, abortion will have to be the issue that Joe Biden is winning on. He is winning on it by 10 points against Trump in a head-to-head matchup on the issue of abortion. So how do they hammer that in? Well, I think the pathway forward as of right now, because he isn't going to win on a message of economics and economic prosperity, even though the economy, I would say, arguably, is in a good position off of numbers. To the American public, it is not. Perception is everything in politics, and it becomes a very difficult sell when you are pitching to the American public Bidenomics and a great pathway forward for the economy when they aren't feeling it at their homes, in their pocketbooks, whatever it might be. I think that's a harder sell. Immigration is a harder sell. Foreign policy now especially is a harder sell. But the issue of abortion is so important to voters that it did take up a big chunk of the voting bloc in 22, and the reason why people back Democrats, because President Trump has touted that he is the reason Roe v. Wade was overturned. I mean, I think Donald Trump, especially being the presumptive nominee right now for the GOP, is how I would put it. I mean, we can take a look, and we can go back and forth if there's going to be some type of surgence for Nikki Haley or Ron DeSantis, both of which are nearing single digits or are in single digits. Everyone else less than 5%. No shot at victory for them. Donald Trump at 62% of primary support nationwide, continuing to grow and grow and grow. He's going to be the nominee. No questions about that. So now it's about framing this election. And again, abortion, as we've seen in Kentucky, Ohio, Virginia, and the 22 midterms, is a winning issue for Democrats, and they're lucky enough that they have it in some swing states. Arizona, Colorado, Florida. These are states, I think Florida and Iowa, we can take off the mark, right? Nebraska, I think it'll be interesting. Nevada is expected to have an abortion referendum. Arizona, Colorado, Nevada. States where we will find that because of this abortion referendum, Joe Biden does have a reasonable shot at victory in these states. Not only because of that, but I think a large part of it will be that. You look at the 22 midterms in Michigan's governor's race and you find that the abortion referendum was nearly identical to the results in the governor election. How does that happen? Well, it happens because the people who were inspired to turn out for the issue on the right to choose, the issue on reproductive freedom, on women's health, women's privacy, whatever it might be, they are turning out and they are, in nearly every case, voting blue because that's the side they agree upon with. And there are voters out there that might not have turned out in the presidential election, may not have been inspired by Joe Biden, are not presently inspired by the Democratic Party, but they are inspired by getting out to vote for the issue of abortion. And I think that's where Democrats come in and say, states like Nevada could go to Joe Biden with that on the ballot. States like Arizona could go to Joe Biden with that on the ballot. And I don't think that's a failing argument. You see it too in Colorado. I already expected it to go blue. New Mexico is probably already going blue. So is Virginia, right? So is Minnesota. These are states where Democrats were already going to do quite well in. And now Colorado has one, Arizona has one, and Nevada has one. So you've taken away some swing states that Donald Trump would desperately need in order to win the presidency again. He won Arizona in 2016, lost Nevada by 2 points, was able to come within 2 points of Minnesota, and came within 6 in Virginia. In 2020, though, that's where the reversion happened. Nevada was still a similar margin, but Arizona flipped blue. Minnesota became an 8-point state for Democrats. Virginia became a 10-point state. Colorado became a 14-point state for Democrats. And it would only be exemplified further with an abortion referendum on the ballot. I also think the pathway forward for Democrats exists in some states where they did do well in the midterm elections as well, right? You look at Wisconsin, you look at Michigan, you look at Pennsylvania. These are states where Democrats, despite the polls saying Dr. Oz is going to win, Tony Evers is going to lose, Gretchen Whitmer is within a point of Tudor Dixon. What happened in Michigan? Not only was it not within a point or 2 points as the poll suggested, Gretchen Whitmer won by 11. You take a look at Wisconsin. Tony Evers was losing to Tim Michels by 4 points in the polls. He won by 4, an 8-point swing. You look at Pennsylvania. They said Josh Shapiro would win by 4. He won by 14, right? So it is very difficult. Dr. Oz is supposed to win by 2. John Fetterman wins by 5. 7 points, 8 points, 10 points. Huge differences in actual margins and actual results. And I think that's what we could see happen here similarly to Joe Biden because of this issue of abortion. Because it is such an important issue to many voters, especially suburban white women, who make up a significant chunk of the voting bloc that used to be Romney, McCain, Bush, Dole, right? Those are the Republicans of the past, and the Democrats, seemingly at least one block of the Democratic Party in the future. Very similar to how John Kasich, as the governor, Republican, endorsed Joe Biden in 2020, despite being the third place candidate in 2016 for the Republican nomination. I mean, you have seen some major crossovers where ancestral Democrats have flipped red, ancestral Republicans have flipped blue, and now you're starting to see a lot more pour over, especially in areas where abortion matters the most. Educated, suburban groups of voters that might have been socially conservative on other issues before, that are starting to become more socially liberal and aligning with the Democrats and Joe Biden on that policy, while also being very much pro-choice. Very staunch on this issue and will vote blue solely and because of it. Those voters exist. They led Democrats to victory in 22, in 23, in numerous special elections, narrowed up Trump plus 30, 40 districts to becoming Trump plus or Republican plus 5 to 10, sometimes even flipping them to blue. Look at New Jersey with some of the state Senate seats there, state legislative seats flipped blue in 2023. This happens because this issue matters a lot to voters. And where I think it also will have a particularly powerful point is with popular governors like Josh Shapiro, like Gretchen Whitmer, and like Tony Evers, who were able to win in these last elections, especially Nebraska's 2nd district, where you have Omaha, where, again, suburban voters would lay the pathway for victory for President Joe Biden. But I do think that also we could see a reality in which this map comes to fruition, where North Carolina and Georgia are back to red. Now, I will say that Georgia very well could go blue in 2024, but based on the fact that I think these states have sort of taken a little bit more of a step back away from Joe Biden, and states like Arizona and Nevada and Colorado will be benefited for Democrats by the fact that there is an abortion referendum on the ballot. Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania having 3 very powerful, very well-liked, and very strong performances from Democrats in the last election, and very popular and very well-liked governors is what I was getting at. They will help Joe Biden move across that finish line. They will help him win in these states that he otherwise might have lost in other elections, without these governors. Might have lost in other realities where Tudor Dixon is the Republican governor. And I think if 2022 and 2023 and all of these special elections in between have shown us anything, it's that the polls are not always correct. Although the narrative is being built very strongly that Joe Biden is set to lose against Donald Trump, I do not think things are over by any means for this election for Joe Biden. I think what the idea is from candidates like Dean Phillips and Marianne Williamson and other candidates across the country, Republicans included, saying that Joe Biden is determined to lose, I do not think is an accurate statement. I do think he is in a worse position than where he was a year ago, than where he was 6 months ago. But that doesn't mean he's on track to lose. I do believe it will be a very, very contentious election, though. Closer than most people expect, and a lot closer than I originally anticipated at the beginning of this election cycle. But at the end of the day, history is rarely wrong. We've never seen anyone besides President Grover Cleveland come back and win the presidency, and this time, there is an issue that is very important to many voters that has turned out groups of support for Democrats in elections where they honestly should not have been able to do as well in 22, in 23, in special elections, whatever it might be. The election results speak for themselves in recent time, and they show that although the polls might show a Republican advancement, the polls might show the GOP doing a lot better than they did in the previous election, it doesn't always come to reality. Because a lot of the groups of voters that might have been previously historically Republicans, white, educated suburbanites that voted the highest rate in this nation, are having a reversion away from the Republican Party and moving more towards Biden and the Democrats at whole, which is why you are starting to see more Democratic victories, despite the polls indicating they were never going to happen. So Joe Biden's pathway forward for him to win re-election, you look at the states with abortion referendums, you look at the 3 states where Democrats did well in, the Rust Belt where Biden was supposed to be this promise candidate to win back these 3 states. He did in 2020. Now he needs to do it again in 2024. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2024 presidential election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.